welcome back to my channel. Today we're going to be talking about paranoid ideation, stress-induced psychosis, and hallucinations within borderline personality disorder. Starting off with paranoid ideation, this is essentially a persuasive belief or perception that others' intentions are to harm you, deceive you, or betray you. And typically there's a lack of evidence to support this belief you may have. This is a form of cognitive distortion. Now, cognitive distortions are usually irrational thought patterns that are exaggerated by negative thoughts and negative feelings. A form of cognitive distortion is emotional reasoning. This is essentially when your thoughts become facts. For example, someone could be taking a little bit longer to respond to you, so in your brain you're thinking about the worst case scenario. You begin to question if they are abandoning you, and because of that perceived thought, it triggered an intense emotion within you. So now you're responding out of your emotional mind rather than thinking through in your rational mind if it's factually happening. Another form of cognitive distortions is jumping to conclusions. This is when you start assuming that you know what somebody else is thinking. You may also assume their intentions. And because that's the way you interpreted it or perceived it in your mind, that validates that thought to feel true to you. Now, when we start to assume other people's intentions or what they're thinking, or you start jumping to conclusions or making predictions with little to no evidence, that is when you start catastrophizing the worst case scenario in any given situation. And that typically leads to the paranoid thoughts. BPD is characterized by emotional dysregulation, so when we feel our emotions, we feel them very intensely. So when we feel that emotion, it consumes us to the point of crisis. So next thing you know, we will be acting on our paranoid thoughts prior to doing the discovery dialogue to see if they're actually true. But in that moment where we feel that intense emotion, it genuinely does feel true to us. It feels like our reality. So for me, I can start thinking that somebody is out to get me. Sometimes I feel like people are staring at me because there's something wrong with me. When people start laughing, I start to think that they're laughing at me. Paranoid thoughts could be, I feel like I'm being followed. I feel like I'm being spied on, or I feel like somebody's recording me. Getting thoughts that you feel like people are going to harm you or steal from you or lie to you. The hardest part about living with this is we're really hypervigilant to any of these thoughts at all times. We're constantly fearful that people have these hidden agendas, and this often leaves us unable to trust people and trust that their intention is pure. Not only that, it makes it really hard for us to relax. This thought process essentially keeps us on guard. And it keeps us living in survival mode if you're not self-aware that that is what's happening for you. Some signs and symptoms of paranoid ideation is feeling suspicious. It's always thinking of the worst case scenario in any given situation. It's feeling like the world is a constant threat. And it's taking any comment made at you and just assuming that the intent of it was made to be harmful. Now for me, paranoid ideation is the source of where splitting starts. This is going between idealizing and devaluing somebody. So typically, splits for me start based off of paranoid ideation and thoughts that feel true to me in the moment. And because of how intense I am feeling those thoughts, it puts me to a point of crisis where I am now acting on those thoughts or emotions, rather being able to decipher if it's true or not. Now let's get into hallucinations. People with BPD can experience hallucinations if they're in a high level of distress. Your environment contributes a lot to your BPD and your level of distress. Interpersonal relationships in general in our lives create a lot of stress for us. More times than not, you will hear someone with BPD say they are most stable when they are alone. But obviously it's hard to be alone and we crave intimacy and connection. So with that brings a lot of distress around fear of abandonment and any perceived threat. We are consistently on guard and hypervigilant to any change in tone of voice, demeanor, like the way you dressed yourself that day or put your shoes on, the way you put your phone down. Any small minor thing can make us sense abandonment or rejection. When we overanalyze those things, we can go into fight, flight, fawn, or freeze, which is essentially a trauma response, where our nervous system gets activated. If you are someone with BPD constantly living in emotional dysregulation and a high level of distress, you may experience hallucinations. I personally have seen shadow people in my peripheral or a flashing light. I look back and it's not there and it freaks me out. I've also heard things like tapping or knocking, my name being called, screaming when nobody else has heard it. And when I'm in a high level of distress, I can also smell things that are burning. I can also smell cigarettes or sometimes cat pee when I didn't even have a cat. You can also experience hallucinations where it feels like something's touching you. If you go into an extreme level of distress, you can experience stress-induced psychosis. Stress-induced psychosis can impair our ability to think, act, and feel rationally. And for us, it can be a really scary experience because we don't actually know if it's irrational or rational in the moment. But what is happening for us in the moment feels very real to us. Some signs of this is disorganized thoughts or speech, being unable to focus or recognize other people's emotions, struggling with lack of memory, or changes in movements where your movements become slow or your movements become fast. Let me know what you think about today's video in the comment section, give it a thumbs up, and don't forget to subscribe. And always remember, thoughts are not facts.